Hello there, and welcome to another slow, sleepy journey into the forgotten corners of history, where nothing explodes, no one rushes, and the loudest sound is the quiet breath of a story almost lost. Tonight, we're not meeting kings or soldiers, no grand battles, no famous names, just one girl, one tiny wooden match, and a job that burned more than it ever paid. She was a matchstick girl. She worked in the shadows. She glowed briefly, then disappeared. But if you listen closely, you'll hear her still. If you're watching this late at night, maybe lying in bed, maybe trying to sleep, you are not alone. This channel was made just for you, to bring you soft, sad stories that stretch into the dark. So, if this quiet little world feels like home, please subscribe. There are so many more forgotten jobs waiting and down in the comments. Let me know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? I love seeing how far these little stories travel now. Take a breath, let your eyes get heavy, and come with me to a narrow room on a foggy street, where a girl once dipped tiny sticks into something that should never have touched skin, and waited for someone to notice. Asterisk, the room was quiet, except for the sound of her little sister breathing. It was not a peaceful sound. Her chest made a soft whistle as she slept like a broken kettle left on the stove. The blanket they shared was too thin, and the night air pressed in like cold smoke. She opened her eyes slowly. It was still dark. The small, cracked window showed no light from the sky. Just a soft gray, like fog waiting to settle. Need to see a clock. There wasn't one anyway. Her body knew when it was time. Carefully, she slid her legs out from the blanket. Her feet touched the stone floor and curled at the shock. Cold again. Always cold. She looked over her shoulder. Her sister was curled up tightly, tiny hands tucked under her chin. She didn't wake her. No reason to. She'd be gone before she even opened her eyes. Her dress lay on the stool, wrinkled and rough. "Kay." She shook it out gently and pulled it over. Her shift, it still smelled like the factory. Even after washing, the sharp, bitter scent of white powder clung to the seams. Her apron was stiff from yesterday's paste in the corner. On the wooden crate that served as a table sat a crust of bread wrapped in cloth. She picked it up and took a bite. It was dry, hard, but it was food. She chewed slowly. Her jaw ached. A little, but she ignored it. The door creaked when she opened it. She stepped outside, her shoes thin as paper, and the street greeted her with silence. Mist hung low, curling around the cobblestones. The air smelled like coal and horse dung. Chimneys puffed far above her, little towers of smoke in the sky. She walked quietly, her hands in her pockets, shoulders hunched. The fog was thick enough to blur the gaslights. They flickered like small ghosts behind dirty glass. She liked looking at them, the way they glowed softly in the gloom. She imagined the lamplighters still out there somewhere, turning the city on, one post at a time. Her feet knew the way. She didn't think, just followed the path around the corner past the old butcher's wall, then left at the alley with the broken barrel. She stepped over puddles, careful not to get her hem wet. There was no extra dress, no change of shoes. This one had to last. The factory stood like a sleeping beast at the end of the lane, long, low, and wide. Its windows were dark. For now, she wasn't the first to arrive. Other girls stood near the gate, quiet and still. Most of them had their heads down. Some rubbed their arms, trying to keep warm. No one talked. She joined the line, hands still deep in her pockets. Her fingers found a small splinter of wood, a leftover matchstick, maybe. She rolled it between her fingertips. Smooth on one side, rough on the other. She didn't take it out, just held it. Quiet comfort. The door opened with a heavy clunk. The older woman who ran the front didn't speak. She never did. Just stepped aside and let them in. The girls moved forward like smoke, drifting inside. She followed them through the thick wooden door and into the long, dim room beyond. The smell hit her like it always did. Not strong at first, just a whisper, but it would get worse. A sour chemical bite that curled in the back of the throat and stayed there, even after leaving. It was the smell of matches being born. She walked past rows of work tables. Each one had trays laid out with thin wooden sticks. Next to them sat shallow buckets filled with the pale white mixture. That was the paste, the dangerous part, a part that burned your skin and took your teeth. She found her usual seat, second from the end, near the cracked window with no glass. Cold wind slipped through, but that was better than the smell. She hung her apron on the hook beside the stool, then tied it tight. The cloth scratched her fingers. The factory provided them, but they never fit right. Always too small or already stiff with dry paste from someone else's hands. She sat, reached out, dipped the first stick. The paste was thick and white, like pudding gone wrong. It clung to the wood like wet chalk. She laid the match gently on the tray to dry, reached for another. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, not too fast. The faster you went, the more it burned. but not too slow either. You had to meet your count, or they'd cut your pay. The room stayed quiet, except for the faint sound of fingers brushing trays. Every so often, someone coughed. A sharp, dry sound. No one looked up. She kept dipping. The paste stung already. Just a little, but by midday, it would be worse. Her fingertips would feel warm and red. At night, they'd pulse under the skin. The wood was soft, slightly damp. Once, long ago, she used to wonder where the sticks came from. Now she didn't care. One of the girls down the line dropped a match. It stuck to her apron. She tried to peel it off without being noticed. The woman at the front didn't speak. She never did. Just watched with hard eyes, like a cat on a windowsill. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. She stopped counting a long time ago. The morning moved on. Light crept through the cracked window, gray and slow. She looked up once, just for a second. The fog was still there. The gaslights outside flickered against the glass. She looked down again and reached for another match. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. Her fingers were already turning a soft pink at the tips, but it was a familiar feeling. Not sharp pain, just the slow kind. The kind that arrived quietly and stayed with you. She dipped the stick into the white paste, slow and careful. The mixture had thickened since morning. It always did. By the end of the day, it would be harder to coat evenly. Sometimes the paste bubbled or formed tiny lumps. She tried to smooth them down with her fingers. A messy tip could cause sparks when it dried. She laid the match on the drying tray, then reached for the next. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. The rhythm helped keep the thoughts away. You didn't think when you dipped. You just breathed and moved your hands. The girl next to her had a bandage wrapped around her wrist. Old cloth, stained at the edges. She dipped more slowly than the others. Maybe her fingers hurt worse. She never spoke. None of them really did. Not during work. It was a quiet world. A loud voice had no place here. Now and then, the older girls would exchange glances. That was enough. A look said everything. My gums bled this morning. Mary didn't come back. I feel dizzy today. Nothing had to be said aloud. They all knew. They all felt the same things. The window behind her rattled when the wind picked up. A sharp chill slipped down the back of her neck. She didn't flinch. Cold air was better than the smell. She leaned slightly toward it, eyes half closed. Just for a second of relief, the woman at the front table moved suddenly, walking past the rows. Her black boots made small, dull sounds on the floorboards. She didn't shout, didn't call names. she didn't have to. Her presence was enough. The dipping continued, slower now. Everyone focused harder. She looked down and noticed a tiny crack on one of the matches. She paused, set it aside gently, and chose another. Some girls would hide broken sticks in their aprons. Others burned them at the edge of the drying racks when no one was watching. Anything to keep the tray count perfect. They were expected to dip over 1,000 a day. She had never counted properly. She just dipped until her hands went numb. The girl with the bandaged wrist wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Her cheeks were flushed. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to cry, but wouldn't. She dipped another stick. No one looked at her. That was the rule. You could feel pain, but not show it. The bell above the door rang once, a low metal sound. It meant it was time to stop for lunch, but lunch didn't mean warmth or rest. There was no canteen, no proper room with benches, just the back corridor near the fire barrels. They weren't lit today. She stood slowly, her knees stiff. Her back hurt from leaning forward so long. She untied her apron, folding it over one arm. The crust of bread she'd brought was still in her pocket. It had crumbled during work, but she didn't mind. Crumbs were enough. She stepped out of the workroom and into the corridor. The air outside the dipping room felt different. Thinner, less sour, but it still wasn't fresh. The walls here were yellowed from years of fumes. The paint peeled in flakes. The girls sat on crates or the floor. Some chewed bread. Some drank from tin cups. A few just rested their heads against the wall. Eyes closed, arms folded. She found a space near the door, not too close to the others. She liked quiet. It made the chewing less noticeable. Her fingers still tingled. She flexed them slowly, one by one, then blew on them. The cold air stung, but it helped. A little. A girl across from her had bright red gums. She covered her mouth when she coughed, but they all saw. No one said anything. The girl beside her whispered, "Mary's got the jaw." It wasn't a question. She just nodded. Everyone had heard. Mary hadn't come in all week. Someone said her face had swollen to the size of a melon. Someone else said her teeth fell out while she was asleep, but no one knew for sure. Phossy jaw. That's what they called it. It started with a toothache, then swelling, then the rot. You could smell it, they said, like dead meat left too long in the sun. The factory didn't talk about it. They called it bad hygiene, your fault. Not the paste, but they knew. She looked down at her own hands. The skin around her nails was red. Her thumb had a tiny blister forming again. It would burst by night. She'd put cloth around it when she got home. She ate the last piece of her bread and licked the crumbs from her fingers. The bell rang again. Time to return. The girls stood slowly. No one rushed, but no one lingered. The second bell always came. Quicker. If you were late, you were marked. Marked meant docked pay. Docked pay meant no supper. She walked back into the dipping room. The paste smell hit her again, stronger now. Like it had been waiting for her. She tied her apron again. The cloth felt stiffer than before. It rubbed against the sore on her hand. She didn't flinch. She sat. Reached for the next match. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down outside. The fog pressed against the window like a soft hand. Inside, the girls moved like machines, silent and steady like tiny ghosts at long tables, making fire for a world that never saw them. Asterisk, she laid it down, dot outside. The fog pressed against the window like a soft hand. Inside, the room had grown darker, though the sky had lightened. It always looked that way. Here gloom, inside, even when the sun rose. If the sun had risen at all. Some days it barely showed itself through the soot and mist. Her eyes stung a little. Now, the paste gave off something sharp, something invisible. The smell lived behind her eyes and in her throat. She didn't complain. Complaining changed nothing. The girl across from her had gone quiet, even quieter than usual. Her mouth stayed closed the whole time she worked. Not out of shyness, but because her jaw looked swollen now. Just slightly. Enough that you wouldn't notice unless you looked closely. She did not look closely. One girl down the row dropped her tray. It made a hard clatter against the wood. Everyone flinched, then froze. A match rolled across the floor and stopped near her boot. The woman in the black dress walked over slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She never did. She bent down, picked up the tray, and placed it back on the table. Then she looked at the girl who had dropped it. One long look. Then she turned and walked away. No words. Just that cold feeling in the room that stayed long after. The girl stared down at her hands. Her fingers moved slower now. Not because she was afraid, but because they were growing stiff. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. The pain in her thumb returned, more like a burn now. She pressed her hand to her apron, just for a moment. But the pause cost her a rhythm. She looked up. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and said nothing. Someone coughed behind her. A dry, tight sound. Then another girl followed. The coughing came like a chain one breath, disturbing another. No one laughed. no one rolled their eyes. They just dipped and breathed and blinked into the chemical air. She shifted on her stool. Her back had started to ache again. The wooden seat had no cushion. Her shoulders hunched forward from hours of leaning. Her neck felt stiff. To roll it once, but gave up quickly. The motion made her dizzy. Sometimes she wondered how long she had been dipping matches. It was hard to count years when days all looked the same. She remembered being even smaller, being scared of the smell, of the trays, of the sharp-eyed woman who walked up and down the rows. Now it felt like the factory had always been part of her, like the walls had grown around her, not the other way around. She wiped her hands on her apron, then dipped again. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. The day crawled forward like a snail. The light outside grew brighter for a while, then slowly began to fade. The fog never left. It just shifted. Sometimes it turned gold when the sun touched it, but today it stayed gray. They were given no break in the afternoon. Sometimes, if the orders were high, the bell didn't ring again until closing dot. Her fingers shook when she reached for another stick. Her thumb had begun to bleed slightly under the nail. She saw it and kept going. The paste didn't care about blood. It stuck anyway. She looked around at the other girls. Some had bruises on their arms. Some had rags tied around their heads. One girl had no eyebrows anymore. They'd fallen out last winter. No one was ugly here. No one was pretty either. They were just quiet faces, pale with long hours, half hidden under scarves and shadows. They were girls you didn't see unless you looked very closely, and no one ever did. Another tray was filled. She pushed it gently toward the end of the table and took an empty one from the stack. Each tray had tiny grooves to hold the drying. Matches straight, if you dropped one in crooked, it would stick to its neighbor and ruin both. She worked carefully. Her stomach made a soft noise. She hadn't eaten since the crust at noon. There was more bread at home, maybe, if her mother had saved it. If not, she'd sleep hungry again. Not the worst thing. Sleep came faster that way. The girl with the red eyes was whispering to someone at the far end. The whisper was so faint, it didn't feel like speech at all. More like a sound that shouldn't be there. A memory flickered in her mind before. The factory, before the paste, when she had stood near a bakery window and smelled sweet rolls for the first time. She hadn't eaten one, just watched. The heat from the oven glass had fogged up the window, and for a moment she'd drawn a little face into the mist. Then someone yelled, and she ran off. She hadn't thought about that day in years. The bell rang. The sound was soft, but it filled the room. Like the air had been waiting for it. Girls stood up slowly. No cheering. No smiles. Just tired movements. Soft, rustling, aching limbs. She stood too, her legs trembling a little. Her arms were sore. Her fingers curled stiffly as she removed her apron. She shook off flakes of dried paste and folded the cloth once, twice, into a square. She didn't wash her hands today. There was no clean water left. The walk to the door felt longer than usual. Her shoes scraped the floor. Her knees cracked softly as she moved. Outside, the fog had returned in full. It had swallowed the streets, leaving only faint yellow halos where the gas lights burned. Her breath came out in clouds. It smelled sharp, almost like the paste. She didn't walk fast. Just steady, one step after another. Boots finding their way home without her thinking. Behind her, the factory doors creaked shut. The light inside was gone. She walked past the butcher's wall, past the alley with the broken barrel. Her body knew the path. She thought about her sister, whether she had eaten, whether she was still coughing. She touched her lip. It felt sore. Not just dry. Sore underneath. She kept walking, the fog curling around her like an old blanket. One hand stayed deep in her pocket. Her fingers wrapped around a leftover matchstick. It was smooth and cold. She held it all the way home. Asterisk, the matchstick warmed a little in her hand. Not from magic, just from her fingers. But still, it felt alive in some small way, like a secret she could carry. She didn't look at it. She just held it quietly, like a tiny piece of fire that hadn't started yet. Her street was narrow and broken. Stones shifted beneath her feet as she walked. Water trickled along the edge, gathering near the drains. Somewhere, a baby was crying. Somewhere else, someone coughed hard and wet, like they were trying to bring up more than just breath. She passed the window with the cracked candle holder. It was never lit. The wax had melted crooked and stayed that way. She passed the green door with no handle. Then the one with the bird scratched into it. Each landmark told her how close she was. Each one meant something. Home was at the end. A single room above the fish stall where the smell never left. Not even in winter. She climbed the wooden steps slowly. Her legs ached and her foot slipped once. She caught herself on the wall. The paint came off on her fingers. She wiped it. On her dress without thinking. The door was closed. She pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room was dim. Her mother sat near the corner, sewing something with frayed thread. Her back was hunched, her hands moving slow and tired. A pot sat on the little stove, though there was no fire under it. just the smell of cabbage and the memory of heat. Her sister lay on the floor with a blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon. She looked up when the door opened, but didn't say anything. Her eyes were too heavy. Her skin looked pale in the half-light, and her mouth was dry. She gave a soft smile and set the matchstick on the edge of the crate they used as a table. Her mother spoke without looking up. "Bread's on the shelf, only a bit." She nodded, even though her mother couldn't see it. She walked to the corner and picked up the piece. It was old and hard again, but it didn't matter. She bit slowly, letting it soften in her mouth. There was water in the tin mug. She drank carefully, not all at once. The metal made her teeth sting. She wiped her mouth and sat beside her sister. No one said much. They never did after work. Her sister reached out a hand and touched the edge of her sleeve. "Your face looks tired." She gave a tiny laugh, barely a breath. "So does yours." They sat in silence for a while. The sound of the street below rose up through the floor. Someone argued over money. A door slammed. A cart rattled past, its wheels knocking over stones. Her mother finally put down the sewing and stood slowly. She lit the candle stub with a match from the old box. The flame flickered unevenly, casting long shadows on the wall. Then she climbed into bed and turned her face away. The matchstick girl stayed on the floor. She didn't want to lie down just yet. Her fingers were still glowing. Faintly, not real light, just a sense of warmth beneath the skin. She pressed her hand to her cheek. It felt strange, like her bones were too near the surface. She remembered something Mary once told her before Mary stopped speaking. If you see light in your fingers, it means you're starting to burn inside. At the time, she thought Mary was being dramatic, but now she wasn't sure. The glow didn't go away anymore. Even after scrubbing, she rubbed her palms against her dress, then looked at the matchstick again. It lay quietly on the crate, as if waiting to be useful. She picked it up and held it to the candlelight, watching the way the tip caught the glow. Her sister whispered, "What do you think they do with all the matches?" She looked down. "Sell them. Light fires, lamps, maybe candles." Her sister turned her head. "Do they ever think about who made them?" She shook her head. "I don't think so." The thought didn't make her angry. It didn't even make her sad. It just felt ordinary. Of course, no one thought of them. They were invisible. Only the match mattered, not the hand that dipped it. She placed the stick back on the crate and leaned her head against the wall. The candle flickered again. The wax ran down slowly, forming tiny ridges like melted stairs. Her jaw hurt again. It had started a few days ago, just a little. Now it came and went like a visitor that wouldn't leave. Sometimes it throbbed when she chewed. Sometimes it ached when she smiled. Tonight it felt dull and deep. She ran her tongue along her teeth. One at the back felt strange, not loose, but soft in a way teeth shouldn't be. She didn't tell her mother. The fire had gone out in their stove weeks ago. They couldn't afford more coal. They boiled water at the fish stall when the man let them. If he was drunk, he yelled. If he was sober, he waved them in. He had a soft spot for her sister. Said she looked like someone he used to know. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to rest. She heard her sister's breath slow. The blanket rustled as she turned over. The floor creaked beneath her mother's bed frame. Outside, the fog curled tighter around the building. It pressed against the window, smudging the streetlight into a pale yellow smear. She opened her eyes again and looked at the matchstick. It hadn't moved. It never would. But in her mind, she saw it burning. Not just the match, the whole world. Lamps, flickering in mansions she'd never see. Fireplaces in rooms with velvet chairs. Candles in silver holders during dinner parties. Laughter rising as the wax dripped down, all lit by her hands. She wondered how many matches she had dipped, how many lights she had made. She didn't know. No one counted. Only the foreman. The money. She picked up the stick again, turned it in her fingers, thought about striking it just to see. But then she set it down once more. She was tired. Tomorrow she would go back. The door would open. The trays would be full. The paste would be waiting. But for now, the match could sleep too. She lay still, head leaning against the wall, arms folded under her chin. Her eyes blinked slowly, once, then twice, until the flickering candlelight became too soft to follow. Its crooked flame danced gently, almost ready to sleep itself. She didn't remember when her eyes closed, only that the fog outside had swallowed the gaslight completely, and the room felt quieter than usual. Even her sister's cough had gone silent for now. The night passed like mist rolling across the river silent, slow and heavy. Morning didn't come with the sun. It came with the sound of boots outside the door, heavy, hurried ones. A man shouting far down the alley, a baby wailing from the fish stall. Life starting again, loud and without kindness. She opened her eyes. The matchstick was still there, still sleeping. Her fingers ached before she even moved them. It was strange how you could feel tired before doing anything. Her mother was already gone, A dent in the blanket and the smell of wool were all that remained. A small piece of cloth lay on the crate. It held a few crumbs of bread folded into the shape of care. She ate without speaking, tore the cloth into two, and shared it with her sister, who nodded but didn't speak either. Then it was time. She tied her apron slowly. Her fingers didn't want to work properly this morning. The joints were made of old wire. The skin near her thumb had peeled during the night. The wound had darkened. She pulled the fabric over it. Her sister sat by the window, knees pulled close to her chest. "You'll be home before I wake again," she whispered. The Matchstick girl smiled faintly. "I'll save you the last bite." She left the room and closed the door behind her. The street hadn't changed. Still wet, still gray. The fog had returned, thicker now, clinging to every brick and boot step. Her feet found the same stones they always did. Her body followed the path without needing to think, past the candle holder, past the bird-scratched door, at the alley with the broken barrel. She paused. Someone had drawn a chalk face on the wall. A child's drawing, big eyes, no mouth. She stared at it for a moment. Something about the empty space where the mouth should be made her chest feel heavy. She reached out as if to touch it, but changed her mind. The factory rose ahead, its windows still dark. Girls stood in quiet lines. The usual hush hung over them, like breath you hold and never release. One girl had a scarf wrapped high over her face. Another leaned against the wall with one shoe untied. She joined them. The door creaked open. Inside, nothing had changed. The same tables, the same trays, the same thick buckets of white. The paste seemed stronger, this morning sharper, almost sweet at first, then sour and heavy in her lungs. She tied her apron again. It rubbed against her wound. She sat down. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. The rhythm returned. Her fingers moved with it, almost on their own. A tiny clicking sound came from her wrists now, each time she reached forward. She didn't know what it meant. Across the table, the girl who never spoke had begun humming softly. It was not a happy tune, just a soft string of notes, barely there. A sound like something you hum when you're trying to keep from crying. No one stopped her. No one joined her. The day moved slowly. Light filtered in, but never fully. Her fingertips felt tender. The burn was different now. It wasn't heat. It was something deeper, something that pulsed with each heartbeat. The paste had stained her. Nails, another tray filled. She set it aside. She dipped the little stick She laid it down. Her thumb bled again. A drop landed on one of the matchsticks. She wiped it off quickly and put it at the bottom of the pile. The girl beside her leaned over and whispered, "Did you hear about Eliza?" She shook her head. "She's gone." "Gone where?" The girl didn't answer, just looked down at her tray and kept dipping. Gone didn't mean moved. Gone never meant that. Gone meant you wouldn't see her at the table again. Gone meant phossy, jaw, fever, or bleeding that didn't stop, or swelling that never went down. She looked down at her own. Hands dot her fingertips were a pale red with a darker spot near the base of her thumb. The skin had begun to crack near the cut. It would split if she bent it too fast. So she didn't. The light shifted. Lunchtime passed without a bell. The foreman had walked through earlier, coat buttoned up high, and said they were behind. Had to keep going. No food today. She didn't mind. Her stomach had stopped growling. It only did that when it thought someone would answer. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. A match snapped in half as she pressed it down. She flinched and quickly picked up the pieces. She hid them in her apron fold and wiped her hands. No one saw. The girl across from her stopped humming. The air felt thicker now. Outside, fog pressed harder against the window. Inside, breath came slower. Movements became smaller. She thought of the chalk face again. No mouth, just eyes. What would it be like, she wondered, to scream? Would the sound reach the sky? She didn't try. No one ever did. The matchstick on the crate from last night stayed in her mind. She wondered if it was still there, if her sister had moved it or struck it. No, she wouldn't. It would still be lying still, just as she had left it, waiting, like the rest of them. Dip. Lay. Her hands trembled now. Not from cold, not from fear, just from being hands too long inside that paste. Hands that had stopped being hands and started being tools. She blinked, but there were no tears. The candle at home would be low by now. She thought of her sister, still curled beneath the blanket, dreaming perhaps of flowers or warm bread, or light that didn't hurt to make. The bell rang. She stood. Her legs were sore. The wooden stool had left marks on her thighs. She rubbed them once, quickly, and followed the others out. Outside, the fog had turned golden in one direction. The light tried to come through like something behind a curtain. She walked home quietly, each step soft. When she reached the crooked steps, she paused, then climbed. The door creaked softly. Inside, her sister was waiting, holding the matchstick and smiling. Asterisk, it was a small smile, the kind that came and went quickly, like a flicker of light behind thick clouds. But it was real, and it made the girl pause for a moment in the doorway. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The room felt warmer than it had the day before. Not warm in the way of fires or blankets, just less cold. Her sister had lit the candle again. The wax had burned unevenly, leaving little rivers down the sides. The matchstick lay in her sister's hand like something special. It hadn't been struck, its head still white, untouched. A tiny promise of fire that hadn't happened. "You kept it," she said quietly. Her sister nodded. "It looked like yours." She sat down on the floor beside her, taking off her shoes slowly. Her legs ached more than usual. Not just tired, deeper than that, as if the ache lived inside the bones. "I thought you'd like it." "No," her sister said. "I like it better before it burns." The girl reached for the cloth on the crate. Her mother had left 2 pieces of bread, this time thin but softer than before. She broke one and handed it over. They chewed. Silence, the candlelight flickering between them. Her sister's voice was small. "Are your hands hurting? A little? Your mouth?" She hesitated, then nodded. "The tooth at the back is moving." Not yet, but she wasn't sure. After they finished eating, they sat quietly for a while, watching the wax drip. It fell so slowly, like time made of milk. She liked how it curled at the bottom into a soft little puddle. Her mother came in later. Her dress smelled like fish scales and smoke. She didn't say anything, just sat down, untied her scarf, and leaned against the wall. Her shoulders looked heavier now, as if every part of her had given up standing tall. The girl reached over and placed the matchstick gently on the edge of the crate again. It rested there, still waiting, still whole. That night, she didn't dream. She closed her eyes and sank. That was all, like stone into still water. The morning came without light. She sat up slowly, feeling a strange ache behind her eyes. Her jaw throbbed. Her fingers felt swollen. The wound on her thumb had darkened overnight. She wrapped a bit of cloth around it, hoping it would last the day. Her sister was still asleep, curled up with the blanket nearly over her head. She didn't wake her. Outside, the street was thick with mist, even thicker than the day before. It felt like walking through cotton soaked in cold dust. Everything looked closer and farther away at once. She passed the chalk face again. It had faded slightly in the damp, but the eyes were still there. The mouth was still missing. She walked slower today. When she reached the factory, The line of girls seemed quieter. Their eyes blinked slowly, as if none of them had truly woken up. One girl leaned against the wall and didn't move at all. Her scarf was wrapped too tight. Her hands stayed in her pockets. The door opened. They went inside. The smell greeted them again, curling into their mouths, their noses, their throats. It was a sour kind of sweetness, like something rotten pretending to be candy. She sat down at her usual spot, tied her apron. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down again. She dipped another and laid it down. Her hands moved slowly, carefully. The paste was thicker today, cold at first, then warm. It always seemed to change, like it had moods of its own. She dipped. She laid the stick down. She thought of her sister's voice. I like it better before it burns. She dipped. She laid it down. The hum of the factory settled into her chest. It wasn't a real sound, just a feeling. The quiet ache of many girls doing the same thing at the same time. The same small motions, the same air dot. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. Her jaw hurt more now. She tried not to think about it. If she didn't chew too hard later, maybe it would pass. Maybe it was just tiredness. Maybe it was something else. A girl across the room stood up suddenly and walked out. No one stopped her. No one asked why. She didn't come back. They didn't speak about it. The tray filled. She pushed it gently to the side and took a new one. She dipped the stick. She laid it down. She thought about fire. Not burning, just the light. What it looked like through a window. What it felt like when you didn't have to make it. She dipped. She laid it down. A memory came to her. Once, long ago, she had seen a lantern float on water. A holiday, maybe, or someone's wedding. She couldn't remember why. Just the light drifting over the river. The flame steady, the paper glowing. It had looked like it didn't belong in this world. She blinked. Another match. She dipped it. She laid it down. The bell rang for the midday break. She didn't move right away. Her legs had stiffened. When she stood, the floor tilted slightly. She held on to the table until it passed. In the corridor, the girls sat quietly. One chewed on something from a tin. Another leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. She sat near the bucket, not too close. The cloth on her hand had begun to stick. When she peeled it back, the wound was wet again. She pressed it with her sleeve and looked away. The girl beside her whispered, "You look pale." She nodded. "I feel a little strange. You should rest tonight." "I don't think I can." The bell rang again. She stood, moved back toward her stool. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down. She kept going. Because that's what you did, asterisk, even when the room spun a little. Even when your hands didn't quite listen the way they used to. Even when your teeth felt like they didn't belong in your mouth anymore. You kept going, because what else was there but you? Stick. She laid it down again and again. The paste was cooler now. Maybe the room was colder. Maybe her skin had gone numb again. She wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was the motion, dipping, laying, dipping again. Like waves in a quiet, dark sea, no one spoke. The girl next to her had stopped humming for good. Her eyes stayed on her tray, but her hands moved slower than before. The lines on her fingers were dark, not with dirt, but with something deeper, stains that didn't wash out. She dipped. She laid it down. Someone coughed behind her. A sharp, wet sound. No one turned. The hours stretched, long and loose like string unraveling from the sky. She dipped. She laid it down, and when her hand shook, she pressed it to her lap, closed her eyes just for a moment, then opened them again. The bell didn't come. She wasn't sure if it was late or if it had rung and she hadn't noticed. But the trays kept filling. The girls kept working. The light outside had dimmed again, a gray that turned to blue, that turned to a kind of yellow that wasn't warm at all. The windows were wet with mist. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down, and then the tray slipped. It was only a second, a tilt of the hand, a shake of the wrist, and the tray tipped forward. Not far, just enough. Just enough, just enough for 6 or 7 matchsticks to fall from their place and clatter across the table. No one said anything, but she froze. Her chest tightened. Her fingers stayed suspended in the air, unsure what to do. The sticks were still whole. None were broken. But they were out of line. And out of line meant wrong. The woman in black boots wasn't nearby. Still, she reached forward quietly, gathered the sticks one by one, lined them up again, just so, pressed them gently into the grooves like nothing had happened. She wiped her hands on her apron and continued. She dipped. She laid it down, but the shake didn't stop. It wasn't in her wrist anymore. It had moved into her arms, her chest. A soft tremble, like something inside her was fluttering. Not wings, but paper burning. She dipped another and laid it down. When the bell finally rang, it felt like it came from far away, like it was calling. Someone else. She stood, her legs held, barely. Her feet moved, slowly. She made it to the corridor with the others. Some sat, some stood. One girl leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. Another wrapped her scarf tighter. Though the air wasn't cold, she sat on the floor, pulled her knees in close, rested her head on them. She didn't eat. She couldn't. Her mouth felt thick, her jaw heavy. The soft spot at the back where her tooth had started to move now pulsed in rhythm with her breath. She touched it with her tongue. The gum there felt wrong, not soft, not firm, just strange. She thought of Mary. She thought of the stories she didn't want to know. When the second bell rang, she didn't move right away. The girl next to her touched her sleeve gently. "You okay?" She nodded. Just tired. But she wasn't sure that was true. She walked back in, tied her apron, sat. She dipped the stick. She laid it down. She did it again, and again, and again. She thought of the match on the crate at home. Had her sister moved it again? Maybe she'd drawn something beside it. A little face, a flower. Maybe it still waited, untouched, just as she had left it. The girl beside her dropped her brush. It made a soft clatter. The woman at the far end of the room looked up, but said nothing. She bent down, picked it up, and returned to work. The room grew darker again. A girl coughed, then coughed again. The windows began to disappear in fog, and the dipping continued. She dipped the stick. She laid it down. She closed her eyes, just for a second, only a second. But when she opened them, the tray in front of her had blurred, not from tears, just from a strange heaviness in her head. She touched her cheek, warm too, warm. The matchstick she held dropped from her fingers before she meant to let go. It hit the table softly, rolled once, stopped. She picked it up again. She dipped it. She laid it down. Then she stood. No one noticed. She walked to the door, slowly, like moving underwater. The foreman glanced her way, but didn't stop her. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't care. Outside, the air was thick and heavy. She leaned against the brick wall, closed her eyes, breathed in deep. The fog entered her like a blanket. She thought again of the lantern. On the river, light floating, moving gently, free. She imagined her. Matchstick burning, not to hurt, not to scorch, but just to shine, just enough to be seen, just enough to be seen, just once. That's all she wanted. For the world to pause, for someone to see her, not the tray, not the dipped sticks, not the smudge on her apron, just her, for a breath, for a blink, before the smoke took it all away again. But the street didn't stop. The fog didn't part. Her shoes still touched the cold stone beneath her feet. She pushed away from the wall and stepped forward. The factory loomed behind her like a giant without eyes, still working, still swallowing girls whole. The sound of it echoed in her chest's soft taps, small clinks, wooden trays sliding. She didn't go home right away. Instead, she walked down the side alley, the one behind the bakery where the bins overflowed with stale crumbs and broken crusts. The air there smelled sweet, even when it was sour. She leaned against the post for a moment, let the scent of old sugar and smoke drift into her nose. Once, years ago, the baker's wife had handed her a burned roll. Too dark to sell, she'd said, but still good. She had smiled that day, a real smile, bright and sudden, like a candle, catching. No one had smiled at her like that since her hand touched her jaw again, still warm, still sore. The gum was swelling. The tooth had loosened more. It didn't wiggle, it throbbed. She walked on, past the bucket that never emptied, past the man who sewed buttons from a wooden box, past the window with a green lace curtain, stained now and sagging. When she reached the stairs to the room above, the fish stall, she stopped to catch her breath, like she had less of it, like someone had taken some away during the day and forgotten to return it. She climbed. The door creaked open. Her sister was lying on the floor, her face turned to the wall. The matchstick was still on the crate, right where she'd left it. Now, beside it was a new one, slightly thinner, slightly bent. Her sister turned her head. "I saved one today." "You did?" She nodded from the pile outside. She sat down beside her. "Let's keep them both." The two sticks side by side. Two small soldiers. Two little promises. The candle was nearly gone. Just a stub now, wax curled like old petals. Their mother wasn't home yet. She chewed a bite of bread, but it hurt too much. The tooth had begun to press against the side of her tongue. The gum pulsed, full and hot. Her sister noticed. "Is it worse?" She nodded. "Does it glow?" She didn't answer, because it did. She'd seen it that morning. A faint, strange shine beneath the skin. Just for a second, when she passed the mirror shard, nailed to the doorframe. Like a tiny star buried inside her jaw. She didn't want to say it out loud, saying it might make it real later when her sister had fallen asleep. She stood by the window, looked out through the fog. The streetlight flickered outside like it always did, like it couldn't decide if it should stay or go. She held one of the matchsticks in her hand, rolled it between her fingers. It was so small, so quiet. She imagined it lit. In her mind, it burned bright and golden. No smoke, no sting, just warmth. A warmth that stayed. One that filled a room and made people hush and smile. She placed the stick back on the crate, sat down, closed her eyes. Let the night take her. The morning was cold. Her legs ached. Her hands felt full of pins. The tooth she touched it, and this time she winced. The pain had changed. It was no longer shy. It bit deep now, throbbed with each step she took. She tied her apron with shaking fingers, kissed her sister's forehead, stepped outside. The fog wasn't white anymore. It had turned brown. Like rust in the air, she walked slower than usual. Each step tapped something inside. Her skull tap, throb, tap, throb, tap dot. The matchstick stayed tucked in her pocket, not to use, just to carry. A little reminder of quiet things. She reached the factory gates, just as the others did. No one looked at her. No one said good morning. She didn't expect them to. She walked in, sat down, and began. Again, she dipped the little stick. She laid it down. The pain buzzed behind her eyes, but she kept going. She had to. She dipped. She laid it down. Time passed. A tray filled. She pushed it gently aside. Her hand trembled again. This time, not softly. Her elbow shook. Her vision dimmed for a moment. Sun inside her mind. She blinked. She dipped. Another. She laid it down, then stood. She didn't mean to. Her legs just rose. She walked, past the trays, past the others, into the corridor. No one stopped her. She pressed her hand to her cheek. It burned. The skin had gone hard. Near her jaw, like stone, beneath silk, she turned a corner, leant against the wall, and waited. She didn't know. For what? Maybe for the light to fade. Maybe for someone to see her. Maybe for her name to come back. She hadn't heard it spoken in weeks, months, maybe more. She rested her head against the bricks, closed her eyes, just for a moment, and in her pocket, the matchstick waited. Asterisk. It felt warm now. Not because of fire, or magic, or dreams, just because it had been near her skin all morning. It lay there, like something alive, breathing very quietly. She touched it once, through the cloth, and her fingers paused. Then she pulled her hand away. She was still leaning against the wall in the corridor. The bricks behind her were damp. Her back was cold, but her face burned, especially the side near her jaw. It had grown worse. The skin was swollen. Now, the soft parts inside her mouth had become hard. She had to breathe carefully through her nose, because opening her mouth hurt. The factory sounds continued just behind the wall. Girls dipping, laying, dipping again. The same soft clatter of trays, the scrape of a stool, the distant voice of someone giving orders. But she stayed in the corridor. Still, she wasn't sure how long. The light through the window turned a little. Not brighter, just different. And then a voice spoke. "You all right?" It was a girl she didn't know well. Her name might have been Annie or Ellen or something else. She had freckles across her cheeks and a scarf pulled tight over her ears. She nodded slowly. The girl didn't look convinced. "You're white as chalk." She tried to smile, but her lips didn't move properly. The girl's eyes dropped to her. "Jaw, is it?" She gave one small nod. The girl said nothing more, just pressed a coin into her hand and whispered for warm milk. "On your way home." Then she walked away. The coin sat in her palm. Small, cold, strange. She hadn't held money in weeks. She closed her fingers around it gently, then returned to the room. The others were still working. She sat and she tried. She dipped the little stick. She laid it down, but her fingers wouldn't stay still. Her hand bumped the tray. One of the sticks landed on the floor. She bent slowly to pick it up. When she rose again, her vision flickered, like lightning behind her eyes. She blinked, waited for it to pass. It didn't. Her forehead felt hot, whole. Body did dot, and still she reached for the next stick. She dipped, she laid it down, but the world around her had softened, like it was made of cloth now, or fog, or sleep. She dipped another. She laid it down, and then her hand slipped. Not far, but enough. The pot of paste rocked forward. Just a little. Some spilled onto her sleeve. It hissed softly. The smell rose, sharp and bitter. She gasped, but the sound didn't leave her throat. A girl nearby turned her head, saw the spill, said nothing. The woman in the boots was coming. She stood quickly, pulled off her apron, folded it, held it close to hide the stain. "I need a wash," she whispered. No one stopped her. She stepped outside again, into the hallway. She walked to the wash basin. It was old. The tap creaked. The water came slowly, drop by drop. She pressed her sleeve beneath it, scrubbing softly. The paste was already drying, turning stiff. It wouldn't come out. Her arm was red now. She looked down at her reflection in the ripples, and for the first time she let herself see it. The swelling, the tightness, the faint shine under the skin. She didn't cry. She only blinked and blinked again. She walked slowly to the back door. No. One called after her. she stepped outside. The fog was waiting, thicker now. It wrapped around her like a coat. She walked without thinking, past the bins, past the window with the broken curtain, past the woman selling needles from a box. The streets didn't notice her, but she kept moving. The coin still rested in her hand. She passed the baker. He was closing early. The shutters halfway down. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did and turned. Away. The milk shop was a few streets over. She turned down the alley where the lanterns hung crooked, the kind made of paper, their red color faded by rain. A woman stood inside the shop, old, quiet, kind eyes. She held up the coin. The woman nodded, took it gently, poured warm milk into a small tin cup, added 1 spoon of something sweet. "Sit," she said softly, "just for a bit." She sat. The chair was low. The floor smelled of cinnamon and dust. The milk burned her mouth slightly, but she didn't mind. It felt good to be still, to be somewhere, without trays, without buckets, somewhere. With warmth. The woman didn't ask questions, didn't speak more than needed. She finished the milk slowly, then thanked her with her eyes. She stepped back into the fog. Her fingers tingled now. Her jaw ached in waves. The side of her face had gone tight, but she walked 1 foot after the other, all the way home. The stairs seemed higher today. Each one took effort. At the top, she paused, leaned against the door frame, rested. Then opened the door. Her sister looked up, eyes wide. She smiled softly. "Just a little. I got warm milk," she said. Her sister blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "I'll tell you how it tasted." She sat down slowly, carefully. The matchsticks were still on the crate, the 2 they'd saved. She picked one up and rolled it in her hand. Her fingers didn't shake now, just trembled. Her sister leaned close. "Tell me," she whispered. So she did not. Just about the milk, but about the chalk face, the girl with freckles, the coin, the red lanterns, and, as she spoke, the matchstick warmed again in her hand. Waiting, still, whole, still quiet, still hers. Asterisk, the matchstick, lay in her hand like a secret, a small one, a quiet one, but real. She held it as she finished speaking. Her sister had fallen asleep beside her, curled like a kitten, her tiny shoulder touching hers. The candle had gone out. No one had lit a new one. The dark in the room was soft now, not frightening, just full of breathing and the slow hum of night. She didn't sleep. Her face throbbed. Not all at once, but in slow, deep waves. The tooth was loose now, worse than before. Each breath made it ache. Even her ear had begun to hurt, as if her body was trying to warn her from the inside. She curled her hand around the matchstick, not to strike it, just to hold something. The quiet lasted a long time. Sometime after midnight, their mother came in. Her boots were muddy. She didn't speak, just lay down beside the wall, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, as if she were waiting for something in the morning. The girl rose slowly. Her feet were swollen. She pressed one hand against the wall to steady herself. Her tongue no longer rested properly in her mouth. The space beneath her jaw was tender, heavy. When she tried to speak, no sound came. She looked at her sister, Dot still asleep. A soft, fluttery breath escaped her lips with each exhale. She leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then went outside. The fog was thin today, almost gone, as though the buildings had been caught without their clothes on. People moved faster now. Carts creaked down the road. "A boy through you said," continued Chet. GPT said, "Absolutely." Continuing gently and seamlessly from where Part 10 paused, a boy threw a bundle of rags into a puddle. Someone shouted for bread from across the street. And still the girl walked. Her steps were uneven. Her shoes rubbed against her heels. Her bones felt loose inside her skin. But she walked not to the factory. Not this time. She turned away when the tall black chimney came into view. Its smoke twisted against the pale sky, rising like a dark memory. Her jaw pulsed. The matchstick was still in her pocket. It pressed against her leg as she walked. She didn't know where she was going, only that the street ahead was quiet and her legs kept moving. She passed the chalk face again. It had faded even more now. Just two ghostly circles where the eyes had been dot, still no mouth, just like hers. She hadn't spoken all morning, COULD, and single quotes to every word she tried to form stayed trapped inside her. She came to the bakery. The shutters were still closed. A small paper sign hung crookedly in the window, "Back in 1 hour." So she kept going, down past the place where the old woman sold twine, past the alley with the leaning lamppost, past the wall that had once been blue. She found herself in a part of the city she didn't know well. There were fewer people here, more cobblestones, more chimneys, more silence. She sat down on a wooden step outside a locked shop. It smelled faintly of ink and old paper, and she breathed. Just for a while, a man passed. He didn't look at her. A child walked by with no shoes. They made eye contact, then looked away. She reached into her pocket and took out the matchst. It looked the same, whole, clean. Its tiny head waiting. She thought of striking it, just once, not for warmth, not for light, just to see it live, to see something burn for her, not because of her. But she didn't. She placed it gently on the step beside her and let her hands rest in her lap. A carriage rolled by. A window above opened. A woman shook out a rug. The world was going on without her. She wondered if she'd ever go back to the factory. If the woman with the boots would notice. If the trays would miss her hands. Probably not. The matchstick rolled slightly with the wind. She caught it again, held it tightly. It felt like the only thing that remembered her name. She rose slowly, walked again, this time back toward home, not quickly, not directly, just slowly enough that she didn't have to notice the pain by the time she reached the crooked steps. Her legs were shaking. She climbed one stair at a time. She opened the door and stepped inside. Her sister was still curled beneath the blanket. Their mother was gone again. The candle was just a stub. The room was silent. She walked to the crate, placed the matchstick beside the others. Now there were three tiny pieces of wood, each with a head, each untouched. She looked at them for a long time, then lay down. She didn't untie her apron, didn't take off her shoes. She lay still, flat, quiet, her head turned to the side. Resting on her arm, the matchsticks were just there. She could smell the wax faintly and a dusty wall. And something else, something sweet and sour, like spoiled flowers. Her breath slowed. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in days, she dreamed not of work, not of pain, but of a small flame, flickering in the dark, and her sister beside her, holding it gently, saying nothing, just watching it glow. Asterisk, that was all the dream gave her. No words, no noise, just light. She didn't wake. All at once, her eyes opened slowly, as if the lids were made of cloth. The light outside had shifted again, pale and gray. Not quite morning, not quite afternoon. Her mouth was dry. Her throat too. But she didn't move. Her head rested against her arm against the cold floor. Her body felt like it had sunk a little deeper into the wood beneath her, like she was becoming part of the room. Her sister was still asleep beside her. She watched the rise and fall of her breath, watched the small twitch of her fingers, the slight curl of her toes beneath the blanket. The matchsticks were still on the crate. 3 little pieces of her life, each saved. Each silent, the girl blinked. Slowly, something inside her was changing now. The ache in her jaw had softened into something stranger. A pressure, like her face, had filled with cotton or steam. The skin was stretched, tight in places where it hadn't been the day before. She sat up, very slowly. Her head pulsed, but she didn't fall. She stood. The room swayed slightly, but she held her balance at the basin. She poured the last of the water into the cracked bowl. Her hands were shaking again. She leaned closer to the mirror, shard on the wall, looked at herself. The girl in the reflection was not the same. One cheek was swollen round, and red and stiff. The eye above it, smaller now, pulled slightly by the skin. She pressed her fingers gently against it. It was warm, too. Warm. Her gums had begun to bleed. She tasted iron. She sat again, this time on the edge of the blanket. Her sister stirred, opened her eyes, then blinked hard when she saw her. Her face folded into something between fear and worry. "You're worse." The girl nodded. "I think you need help." She nodded again. "But we don't have anything." She knew. They both knew. There was no doctor, no medicine, no coins left. Only time, and pain, and waiting. Her sister reached for her hand, held it tightly. The girl pressed a kiss into her sister's knuckles, then leaned her head against her shoulder. Outside, a horse passed by, hooves slow and steady. Inside, the room fell still again. The girl stayed there for a long time, breathing, listening. She didn't know what she was waiting for, just that something had to change, and that it would. With or without her, by evening, the sky had gone soft again. The color of dirty wool. The matchsticks remained untouched, but her fingers. It's 8. She picked one up, rolled it between her hands. It was the first one she'd ever saved. The oldest, the straightest, the one she'd nearly thrown away, but didn't. Her sister watched her. "You want to strike it?" She thought for a moment, then nodded, just to see. Her sister reached for the box. It was almost empty. Only 2 strips left. She held it steady. The girl struck the match. It flared suddenly. A sharp hiss, like steam escaping. The light was golden, brighter than she had imagined. It lit her fingers, her cheeks, her swollen jaw. The flame danced, and for that one short second, she forgot everything. The pain, the factory, the smell of paste, the bucket, the boots, the blood, all of it. Only the flame existed. warm and alive. Then, slowly, it faded and curled and died. The blackened stick fell to the floor. Smoke trailed upward. Her sister didn't speak. Neither did. She looked at the matchstick on the floor, still warm, then at the two on the crate. Still waiting, still. Hers still whole. She looked at the two matchsticks on the crate, side by side. She didn't reach for them this time. She only looked. They were hers, but they didn't belong to her, now not fully, not in the same way. One had been burned, the others hadn't. That seemed to mean something. She didn't know what. The room was quiet again. Her sister leaned against her, her small arm tucked around her waist. There was no candle tonight, just the soft gray light from the sky leaking in through the cracks in the wood. It made everything look washed out, pale, like it was all fading. She wasn't hungry. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. But her mouth didn't want bread now, only water. And even that felt too heavy. She lay down again, her cheek pressing into the blanket. Not the swollen side. She couldn't lie on that side anymore. It was too hard, too sore. The cloth under her cheek was rough. She closed her eyes and listened to her sister breathing, to the wind outside, to the faint echo of boots passing in. The alley dot. There was no knock at the door, no. One came. The world carried on, and she lay still. Her thoughts were soft now. Not words, not dreams, just little pieces of feeling, like crumbs. The sound of her mother humming when she was still kind. The smell of hot bread in a crate. The feeling of dipping the first matchstick. The warmth of the milk. The girl with freckles. Coin in her hand. All of them drifted through her mind like dust in a sunbeam. Nothing stayed for long. Her body was heavier now. Even her fingers. The hand that had always dipped and laid, dipped and laid. Now it simply rested. Her sister didn't speak. She just sat beside her, holding her wrist. The silence stretched. The matchsticks stayed on the crate. After some time, maybe an hour, maybe more, her sister stood, crossed the room, picked up one of the sticks, the second one, the newer one. She sat beside her again. Should I light it? She whispered. The girl blinked, slowly. She couldn't nod anymore, but her breath moved once. Her lips parted, just slightly. It was enough. Her sister struck the match. It sparked, then flared, and lit up the whole room, just for a moment. The walls turned golden. The crate cast a long shadow. The girl's pale face was touched by fire lig. Her sister held the match carefully, like it was a bird. They both watched it burn, watched it until it was almost gone, until it reached her fingers. Then she blew it out. Smoke rose, soft and white. She placed the blackened stick beside the first one. Now there were two burned and one left. Her sister picked up the final Matchstick, Height held it in her lap. She didn't strike it, she just held it and waited. The girl's breathing had grown shallower now, like the air itself was becoming too heavy to carry. Her jaw no longer ached, had passed aching. It was numb now. She couldn't feel her toes, or the floor beneath her, or the sound of her own heartbeat. But she felt the warmth of her sister's hand on her wrist. That stayed, and that was enough. Outside, the wind rattled something loose, a shutter, a loose sheet of tin. It didn't matter. She blinked again. Once, twice. Her sister leaned down and placed her forehead against hers. She whispered something, too soft to hear. Maybe it was a word. Maybe just a sound. But it settled into the girl like a lullaby. The kind that didn't need music. She closed her eyes, and this time they stayed closed. Her sister didn't move. She held the last matchstick like a secret, like a story not yet told, like something that might save someone else one day. Outside, the sky faded. Inside, nothing burned, but something still glowed, quiet, soft, small, and still hers. Asterisk, and that was the quiet life of a matchstick girl. A small flame in a city full of smoke. A girl who worked in silence and vanished just as quietly. If you're still here, still listening, thank you, not just for your time, but for your stillness, for making space in your night, for someone the world forgot. These stories are never easy, but they matter, because they remind us that history isn't just made by kings and soldiers. It's also made by girls with burnt fingers and no voice. If this story helped you rest tonight, or made you feel less alone in the dark, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are many more soft and sleepy journeys ahead. And before you drift off completely, tell me down in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? I read every one. Now, let the world grow quiet. Let the room fade. And if your eyes are still open, it's okay to close them now. You're safe, you're warm, and somewhere, a little matchstick is still glowing.